Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Orlando, Florida, where I've been all day today. Yesterday we were in Tampa, St. Pete, doing some interviews. We interviewed Michelle Rayner, who is running for Congress. She is the first openly gay woman of color in Florida's House of Representatives. Then we interviewed some students, parents, on the Don't Say Gay bill, which obviously we've been covering extensively. Earlier today, if you missed it, we interviewed Maxwell Alejandro Frost, who is running for Congress here, on the just insane housing crisis here, which we're going to talk about more. And a couple hours ago, we interviewed LGBTQ high school students, because they are the ones at risk. Don't be fooled that this bill, the Don't Say Gay bill, is just stopping at third grade. It was written to be intentionally vague, and it is beyond a slippery slope that can affect middle school, high school, you name it. But I wanted to interview Representative Smith. You're a Florida representative. You are the first gay Latino elected,
correct,
to the House here. And I've been following tweets and things you're saying, because you're kind of connecting that this attack, this culture war, and it's not just stuff that Governor DeSantis and the Republicans have done towards the LGBT community, critical race theory, COVID stuff. You're basically connecting it to, why don't we actually address real issues instead of making up issues?
That would be nice.
Can you first address, because you've been one of the leaders on this, and by the way, smash the like button, share this live stream, like button under the video. Address this bill, because you hear from supporters of it just basically the talking point, well, what's wrong with not teaching sexual ideology or identity in such younger grades? But to me, because I read the bill, it seems to be quite more than that.
Yes, we call it the Don't Say Gay bill because it prohibits classroom instruction or inclusion of LGBTQ people, particularly sexual orientation or gender identity. So they're really singling us out, our community out, and they have said that really in so much of the rhetoric and their defense of the Don't Say Gay bill. When the governor's press secretary created so much controversy and news when she tweeted out that really the bill should be renamed to be the anti-groomer bill, it was just another reminder that the bill was never about parental rights. It was about disparaging and attacking LGBTQ people. And of course, when she says she's calling it the anti-groomer bill, she is saying that somehow in schools, that schools who have safe, healthy, inclusive, and affirming policies for the LGBTQ students, that they're somehow pedophiles. That's what a groomer is. She accused all opponents of the bill of either being pedophiles themselves or being folks who are enabling pedophiles, which is not just totally an egregious use of taxpayer money. It's also extremely inappropriate for the governor's press secretary to be making baseless accusations, and it's a bit libelous. Calling LGBTQ people pedophiles is the oldest anti-gay trope in the book. But that's how desperate they have become in their defense of the bill, in their messaging. Is basically their message is now Pizzagate. Anyone who opposes this bill is, somehow involved in some nefarious conspiracy to sexually abuse our children, which of course is totally baseless and appalling as far as a message in defense of the bill.
And I think people also should realize that there's really life or death consequences here. I was just interviewing some LGBTQ students over at the high school in Winter Park, and one of them told me, most of my LGBTQ friends are on antidepressants or suicidal already. There is a mass homeless issue in the LGBT community. So if you already have such mental health challenges and obstacles, and then you're basically putting a gag order on these kids where they can't talk about if they have same-sex parents or just their family, or have to be very anxious what they can and cannot say. Same goes for teachers too. I mean, you're basically taking already a lot of teenagers that already have enough obstacles without this.
Well, and Jordan, there's a couple things I want to address from that. First, the bill is so intentionally vague because it is written as first a prohibition on classroom instruction of sexual orientation or gender identity for K through 3, or in a manner that is not deemed age appropriate, which of course applies for 4th grade through 12th grade. Who decides or how is it going to be decided what is or is not age appropriate about sexual orientation or gender identity, of course, was not specified. That's going to be essentially up to the State Department of Education to decide. And really, the fact that they didn't define classroom instruction either, for it to be left to, well, classroom instruction is going to be the teacher talking about anything related to sexual orientation or gender identity, even if a student brings it up and it becomes a discussion. It doesn't necessarily need to be part of a printed, approved curriculum for it to be deemed classroom instruction. It's all very vague, and it's vague on purpose to create a chilling effect, not only for the teachers and the schools, but for the students themselves, to be wary of ever talking about gay or trans stuff under penalty that they could possibly be sued. That's the mechanism by which the enforcement of the bill is going to happen. It's not, oh, if you step out of line, the Department of Education is going to fine you, they're going to hold the school accountable, etc. No, it's through litigation. They're encouraging Floridians to sue the school if they believe a violation of the bill has taken place. And if there's no definition of what is or is not age appropriate classroom instruction or inclusion of sexual orientation or gender identity, then just think about the lowest common denominator. They're not the majority, but there's a fringe group, a small vocal minority of folks who typically show up to school board meetings and want to ban books and things of that nature, who don't believe any conversation or classroom inclusion or instruction that includes LGBTQ people is age appropriate. They don't think any of it's age appropriate. We've now just armed them with the ability to sue a school district and waste taxpayer money and basically bully and scare teachers and students into submission about not talking about us, about censoring us. The other thing I want to mention is the vulnerability of LGBTQ students, which you just mentioned. According to the Trevor Project, we know that LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their peers. That is not because simply being LGBTQ or simply identifying as queer means that you're more inclined to a suicidal ideation. It's the fact that LGBTQ students are disproportionately more likely to be abused, abandoned, or neglected by their family because of their sexual orientation or gender identity that leads to these terrible statistics. And bills like Don't Say Gay make that problem worse. They make it worse because the bill sends a dangerous message that there's something so wrong with LGBTQ people or LGBTQ topics that the state must go out of its way to censor and prohibit those conversations or instructions in the school in a way that they don't prohibit any other so-called sensitive topic. There's no statutory prohibition in Florida law against talking to school-age children about matters of life and death, about suicide, about drug use, about war, about abortion. None of these topics are prohibited or censored from classroom instruction in this way. It's just us, just LGBTQ people that are the target, which sends a really dangerous message to our young people.
And something you touched on, there's a lot of LGBTQ students that are not comfortable being out at home, are afraid to tell their parents, or afraid of worse, not just rejection,
Correct.
but worse. So school is really the place that they can be themselves, talk to guidance counselors, teachers. This would actually create a mechanism where in some cases teachers would have to tell the parents or out the students to the parents, correct?
Well, so what you have specifically in the bill, what is you have the reality that the school and the teachers would be only allowed to withhold information from a parent if they believe that disclosure of information about a student, let's say their sexual orientation or gender identity, that a reasonable person would believe that that disclosure would result in abuse, abandonment, or neglect. There were provisions, amendments to the bill that actually totally made that worse and said that the school would still be required in those cases, but after public pressure, the amendment was withdrawn. But the fact that the amendment was introduced by the bill sponsor in the first place demonstrates how far some of these Republican lawmakers are willing to go. The fact that they would be willing to put students and kids at risk of abuse, abandonment, or neglect just to wage these culture wars to score political points. I mean, it's really scary how far they've gone in these attacks against LGBTQ youth. Just last session, we squandered almost the entire 60-day session with a mean-spirited bill to ban transgender students from being able to participate in team sports. While we were having an affordable housing crisis, while we were still dealing with COVID as we are today, while we were still having lots of economic issues and teacher shortages across the state. That was a marquee bill of Governor Ron DeSantis's in the 2021 session that got in the way of us being able to address Florida's real problems. This session is no different. It just never, it's almost like Governor DeSantis does not take the responsibility of governing a state that has real problems seriously. He's not pandering to his base in Florida when he's championing these bills. He's pandering to a base outside of Florida for a future presidential run. It's so calculating, but it's also so dangerous that he's doing this on the backs of our most vulnerable students.
And let's talk about that because to me, I mean, we live in a new Gilded age, not just in Florida, around the country. Rent is skyrocketing. Affordable housing is skyrocketing. There was just a piece on 60 Minutes how Wall Street is buying up all these properties as soon as a house goes on the market.
That's right.
Boom. Wall Street gets it, all cash deals, and then either bulldozes it or puts money into it, and then is literally renting it at double the price. You have the climate crisis. I mean, there's so many things, particularly in Florida.
Sure.
And a lot of people in the past have moved to Florida because it was less expensive, the weather, but lower taxes, easier to afford. But now, I mean, I've been talking to people, their rents are going up 30%, 40%, 50%.
In Florida, that's happening. Yes.
So obviously, LGBTQ people are under attack. But at the same time, all these culture wars in Texas and Florida, it seems like a mass distraction technique so that people will stay numb to the economic crisis.
Well, that's right. Right before the session began in December, just a few months ago, I penned a letter to Governor Ron DeSantis that many other Democratic lawmakers signed on to, where we urged him to declare a housing affordability state of emergency in Florida. The reason we asked him to do this was doing so would open up existing statutory protections in Florida law for consumers against price gouging. And we have seen the rent hikes in Florida that have been upwards of 10, 20, 30, 40% rent hike over the previous year. The Tampa Bay area is seeing some of the largest average annual rent hikes in the nation. In fact, they're number one at about 25% is the average rent increase over last year in Tampa Bay. And the governor just very callously dismissed the letter and said, send the letter to the federal government, send it to Joe Biden, to President Joe Biden. We have been dealing with a Florida-specific housing affordability crisis that's been decades in the making. We've been dealing with it for many years, certainly many years before President Biden was elected to office. And part of the reason we've been dealing with it is the Republican-led legislature has swept our affordable housing trust funds to the tune of $2 billion over the last 20 years from that trust fund, and they repurposed it to other things. That led to...
Like corporate welfare for Disney?
Correct. That led to less money for the construction of affordable housing units in Florida. That means that we have substantially less supply of affordable housing units to meet the increased demand, and we see these surging rent hikes. And on top of that, we have a property insurance crisis, in part due to the fact that, you know, we're a state that is prone to natural disasters, specifically hurricanes, and that has caused a lot of instability in our property insurance market. And this is the number one issue we appear to be hearing about from our constituents, and yet we just adjourned a 61-day legislative session 2022 where property insurance literally was not addressed. There were no reforms brought forward that make any changes because we instead were defending against Don't Say Gay. We were defending against this school and corporate censorship bill known as the Stop Woke Act. That, you know, really punishes corporations for engaging in diversity, equity, and inclusion training with their own staff, and does the same to schools and kind of censors them and bullies them out of teaching real history.
This is the one that basically avoids trying to make white students feel uncomfortable.
Right. If a student or an employee in a private business or corporation is made to feel any type of guilt or discomfort, then they can file a lawsuit under the Florida Civil Rights Act, which totally turns the Florida Civil Rights Act on its head. It's meant to protect employees in particular from unfair discrimination based on their race, their gender, their religion, their disability, any protected class. Now it's about how you feel about a training. This is part of Governor DeSantis's censorship and surveillance agenda. And when I say censorship and surveillance, you have the censorship of LGBTQ topics in school. You have the censorship of the ability of corporations to engage in honest training that builds inclusive and diverse corporate cultures at their workplace. You have the governor going on the record saying that he supported during legislative session proposals to install video cameras in classrooms to make sure that teachers were compliant with state standards. This is the stuff of authoritarian regimes, but it's happening right here in the so-called free state of Florida, as Governor Ron DeSantis puts it.
And let me ask you also, I mean, obviously you're a Democrat, but it seems to me the Republicans are doubling, tripling down on culture war stuff, but you look at the Democratic Party, especially nationally, I mean, yeah, there's a 50-50 Senate, but there's a lot of excuses why things aren't getting done. The parliamentarian won't let us. Cinema and Mansion on a local level, not just in Florida. A lot of Democrats are taking real estate cash, corporate cash, and voila, the keys to the cities are going to real estate developers. So what role? Obviously, the Democratic Party is better towards LGBTQ people and these cultural issues, but even the students I interviewed earlier say you don't react to Republicans moving further and further right by then moving to the center. They said Democrats should be moving further to the left and actually fighting What's your response to that? Because to me, DeSantis and other Republicans are winning on these culture war issues because there's not really a populist alternative.
Well, and what we need to make sure is that we have more Democrats, particularly in Florida, who are really pushing that populist economic message, who, by the way, I mean, I'm frankly committed and married to these issues. I was elected in 2016, and since the beginning of my tenure in elected office, and I've been, reelected twice in 2018 and in 2020, and hopefully again in 2022, we focus on pocketbook issues. We are interested in expanding healthcare access. We are interested in making sure that we are supporting our small businesses, that we have the resources to make sure that we're fixing the broken unemployment system in Florida that has wreaked havoc during COVID-19, that we have good, reliable public transportation here in the city of Orlando and Orange County so that people can easily get to and from work. We pushed the $15 minimum wage when it passed and was approved by Florida voters, thank God, in 2020, and we're going to see it finally gradually increase to that $15 minimum wage. This is something that we've been out there very vocal about, very important pocketbook issues, earned sick time, paid sick leave. These are the issues that we've been championing for some time, and I believe that some Florida Democrats are actually starting to catch on that this is what we should be leading with, and making sure also that we stay committed to those values, because and the issue that I brought up about property insurance and housing affordability, these are the two most important issues that people keep talking to us about, and that's why we remain focused on them.
Mm-hmm. And what do you say to a lot of progressives, because I see them all the time, especially online, that have just become very cynical, and we have a two-party duopoly, maybe the Democrats are better on social issues, but economically they're all corrupt, and I'm out. I'm not going to vote. I'm just going to do direct action. What's your message to people that are basically fed up with waiting?
Well, the two-party system that we have is the system that we have for now, and I associate most frequently with the Democratic Party. I'm proud to be a Democrat and member of the Democratic Party. My values, the issues that I've championed, being someone that cares about lifting people up, improving their lives, actually fighting for equality for all, not equality and fairness for some, as Republicans do. I speak for myself there, but for folks who are disengaged, for folks who are not hopeful or are discouraged, the reality is that when you check out of the democratic process, it helps the other side. They are sending a message that is banking on and counting on people to just give up, to just throw their hands up, and I don't think that we should succumb to that narrative.
Mm-hmm. And Governor DeSantis, as you mentioned, it's not a secret, he's eyeing 2024. Can you kind of talk about, it's been a culture war on steroids here, not just with the Don't Say Gay bill, Stop Woke Act. He's made COVID a cultural issue, like many other Republicans.
Non-stop.
Yelling at kids wearing masks. What does that portend? We don't need to get into political predictions, but the presidential season will be here before you know it. It seems like he's going to run. To me, he's a more competent, dangerous version of Trump. And frankly, as we've talked about, I don't really, I don't feel good about any Democrat beating him. So what should the country know about DeSantis?
Well, I think that right now he's one of the most dangerous elected officials in America. He continues to put out misinformation. He continues to divide Floridians for his own political ambitions, for his own political gain. Literally every decision that the governor has made has been with his own best interests at heart. It is all about him obtaining more power and collecting and accumulating more power, even from the Republican-led legislature. Look at what's happened with redistricting, a once-in-a-10-year process, once-in-a-decade process. The Florida House and Senate are both majority Republican, and yet they capitulated to his unprecedented demands to eliminate black congressional representation in North Florida, and actually even with the seat here in Central Florida. And those who didn't go along 100% with his demands on redistricting have already been punished and have already seen many of their legislative priorities fail. And here we are at an impasse. We're at an impasse with redistricting because the Republican legislature can't come up with a map that makes Governor DeSantis that satisfies him. Right now he's acting as if he's unstoppable, and this is a governor that won in the slimmest of slim margins by less than 1% of the vote in the last gubernatorial election. I think people need to understand that that he is not as popular as they believe him to be, and that he can be stopped before a presidential election.
I can kind of talk about, because we have to remember the human beings that are under threat here. You're the first LGBTQ Latino elected here. What would this have done when you were younger to you and your development, if you were worried about talking about yourself in school? I don't know how young you were when you realized you were gay, but from your experience, what are the real consequences here? Because just talking to some of these students today, you kind of get it when you talk to them, how they already have it really tough, and now you've just added fuel onto the fire.
Well, I mean, this type of rhetoric, these bills, it is just fueling more homophobia and transphobia. When I was growing up, when I was a queer kid in high school that wasn't out, but I knew who I was, I didn't have any role models. I didn't know who Harvey Milk was. I didn't have anyone to look up to that was like me, that helped me understand that being gay or being LGBTQ is a healthy and normal part of any society or of any school. And bills like what we've been dealing with this year and last year send a totally different message. And it's not just the LGBTQ community that they're going after and then gaslighting us afterwards and telling us that they're not going after us. It's like they throw rocks at us and then they hide their hand. It's also the Black and African American community with this unnecessary prohibition on CRT, which is not even happening in our schools, but they want to protect people from feeling discomfort about learning about our history, about the history of civil rights in this country, the history of slavery. History is sometimes, especially when you're telling people's stories and their perspectives, it can be inherently subjective. So this idea, this absolutist version of history, that it is never subjective, that it is what the state approves as mandated curriculum as it relates to history, is not what happens in free states.
Mm-hmm. And my last question to people who say, well, I care about, LGBTQ people, but this is just culture war stuff. I'm concerned about gas, or I'm concerned about these rent, affordable housing. What's your message to them? Because to me, it's all connected. The status quo economically is going to stay the status quo if you have all the focus, including the media, that's latching on to these stories.
Well, that's right. That's right. I mean, listen, we need in the state of Florida, we need our state government, and we need a governor who is going to fight to stop rising property insurance rates. Instead, we have someone who's doing everything that they can to stop wokeness. How does that improve anyone's life? How does it improve the lives of everyday Floridians to be engaged in these non-stop culture wars that are a distraction from the fact that Republicans are not offering Floridians anything? And
what would be your message to fellow Democrats? Obviously you're not going to talk out of turn to your tribe there, but
I talk out of turn to my tribe all the time.
Doesn't the Democratic Party need to do more? Because frankly, you should be wiping the floor.
Exactly
with
right.
Culture war of people like Ron DeSantis.
It is about being disciplined, focusing on our core message about fairness and equality for all, about making sure that all Floridians continue to have the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And that we're lifting up all boats, that we're fighting to improve the lives of Floridians by focusing on economic issues. That is absolutely, absolutely the path for us. What is so challenging, Jordan, is that it doesn't always fit inside a pretty box or inside the lines, especially when our communities are under attack. Listen, I get this all the time. I'm the first openly LGBTQ Latino lawmaker in Florida's history. I was elected in 2016. It's now 2022. I really, really hoped that by now, at this point in my term of public service after 6 years, that these would not be the fights that I would have to be engaged in. Some of the trolls, the detractors on social media, they want to level unfair accusations against me, for example, that I'm always engaged in fighting for the LGBT community as if that's a bad thing. And yet, what's mostly happening is we are having to respond to attacks against our community. And we can't ignore those attacks. We have to fight back against them.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for taking the time, State Representative Carlos Smith. We'll be live again tomorrow throughout the day. We're going to be live with Representative Anna Escamani. We're also going to be in Tampa. We're going to be interviewing folks with the tenants union there because, like he was saying, it is out of control in Tampa, Miami too. It's becoming an economic Hunger Games. Good luck. If you're from Tampa or Orlando, native, a working class person, good luck staying in your apartment house with these skyrocketing prices. So we're going to talk to people. Some of them, by the way, are facing eviction right now. So that'll be tomorrow. Please support this reporting trip, statuscoup.com/Florida trip. You could donate there. It is not cheap to travel around the country, flights, hotel, rent a car, gas, I can tell you, from Tampa to Orlando. So statuscoup.com/Florida trip. The link is in the description. And you could sign up as a member, statuscoup.com/join. Membership is how we do more on the ground reporting. You could sign up $5 to $10 a month, statuscoup.com/join.